Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Naruto. What if Naruto was descendant of dragon? Part 5. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends and also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created many playlists, check it out in the channel. So let's start the video. Flashback to a nearby valley. Naruto was busy training with both Fenrix and Jiraiya as the Sannin and the senior dragon ascendant watched Naruto spar with not just a large number of his own Kage Bushin, but several of Jiraiya's own Kage Bushin. As the blonde fought with his Kage Bushin, as well as learning the foundations of his new technique in using his Kekkai Genkai and being able to switch and utilize the 5 elements, the two chatted for a while. While Fenrix was already aware of Naruto's secret lineage, it made him feel more at ease with talking to Jiraiya. He knew that from the records from his own master Valen, that Jiraiya was the sensei of the former 4th Hokage who was blood related to Naruto. He also knew of the legacy of the 4th Hokage and the reason why no one knew just how closely related Naruto was to the 4th Hokage. It was something that the dragon ascendant could understand in his own fashion. The 4th Hokage was a remarkable man, and so was his wife. It was a shame that both were not about to see their son grow up. As they finished their discussion, the Sannin decided to push forward his idea, and Fenrix had to admit that despite knowing full well about the ability Jiraiya had in the sense of being able to summon frogs, giving this ability to Naruto would further supplement his already growing abilities and would be handy in the battles that were soon to come. Besides, he had been familiar with animal summons before in his younger days, though not in the way he did in Naruto's world. He knew that like other worlds that had dragons that resided in them, there had been ascendants and dragons in this world. However, Naruto's world had a different history than the other worlds once home to dragons and other ascendants like himself. The creatures left in the land had changed for many centuries ever since the exodus of the dragons, the dragon kings, and the loyalist ascendants from the realms and worlds. With the approval of both Jiraiya and his dragon ascendant teacher, Naruto decided to focus his powers as well as being able to tap into the power of the Kyuubi. He knew that this was not going to be easy. Fenrix had explained to him that the Kyuubi had managed to contain his dragon ascendant powers when he was younger, and the Kyuubi would no doubt be in a very foul mood should the two of them finally meet face to face. He had asked if there was some way to force the Kyuubi out of him, but the senior ascendant replied that the idea was too risky in the sense that he and the Kyuubi were bound long before he was given the powers of the blood ascension ceremony, and therefore the removal of the Kyuubi could very well kill him. Naruto was not very happy with the news but decided to make the most of it. He wrote his name on the scroll and then began to focus his chakra. However, he decided to pay the Kyuubi a visit. He quickly found himself before a massive gate, and there was some sort of paper seal. Before he could make sense of where he was at the moment, a massive roar was heard, and he looked to see 2 glowing red eyes behind the bars, which were quickly followed by what appeared to be a massive form. And sure enough, he was quick to stay where he was, as she could see the outline of a paw with some very nasty claws. So, my jailer decided to pay me a visit. Naruto recovered from the surprise and then spoke to the being before him, who he now recognized. "You're the Kyuubi, aren't you? Very good, brat. Though I doubt I can call you that since your powers as an ascendant are now awakened, though restrained. Had I moved faster all those years ago, I would have been able to fully restrain that power. However, that idiot with the snake powers interfered with another of my attempts to seal away your Dragon King powers for good. Do you know about it?" "Yes, I do. I was hoping to seal its powers away, but the consecrated blood of a Dragon King is nigh impossible to seal easily, and now that it's unleashed from my attempts, there's nothing I can do to contain it. I cannot kill you since you contain me, and should you die, then I will die, but since your dragon ascendant's powers are awakened, I have no chance of even remotely harming you to begin with. So what do you want from me?" Naruto then spoke about gaining the chakra of the Kyuubi, and with that the Kyuubi growled and replied, "You already have the power of the dragon ascendants, and they were more than able to outmatch even my power in the past, though that was when I was younger and more naive, and you have the consecrated blood of a dragon king flowing in your veins as well. What kind of help could I possibly give you? You can give me help when I can't use my ascendant powers, you furball. I doubt you'd like it if you were only stuck behind that cage all your life. Besides that, you're my tenant, so you owe me rent." "I owe you rent?" "Damn right you do. You've been with me for the past 12 years of my life, and in those 12 years, you've made my life miserable, so I think it's high time you gave back something for all the trouble you caused." Kyuubi growled and then replied. "Very well then, here is my power, so use it well. You may have potential to surpass me, but until then you had better not die." In that moment, after returning from the area where the Kyuubi had been sealed away, Naruto felt the power of the Kyuubi fill him, and then he bit his finger to draw on the blood after he had felt the level of chakra he had grow and be more than enough for any jutsu he might use, though now was the time to see if the chakra he had from his own reserves and the chakra of the Kyuubi was enough. He then placed his hand on the ground and saw the symbols and shouted out the command for the jutsu to be used. Kuchiyus no Jutsu. In that moment, a massive surge of energy was felt by everyone in the area, and there in a moment was a massive cloud of smoke that was reaching upwards. Naruto stepped back a bit but was quickly taken to the top as he was now deep in the smoke. The whole thing lasted for a moment or two, and then Naruto found himself on top of what felt like cloth. He stood up and found himself on top of something that was massive, and that from the fact that he could feel it moving up and down, as well as hearing breathing sounds, it was alive as well. He leaped off and then turned to see just what he had summoned on his first try. Naruto was struck dumb by the sight of the massive toad that was before him at this moment. The creature had deep red skin and had on a pipe in its mouth, as well as a massive open jacket on it and what appeared to be a massive sheath with a short sword on it. He had never expected to be summoning a massive creature like this on his first try. But he had to admit that the sight was very good for him to be able to get this far. The toad then looked about and then spotted Jiraiya and spoke. "Well now, it seems I finally got summoned in a place that is not the least bit uncomfortable or strange, but still, there seems to be no fighting happening here, Jiraiya, so why am I summoned, you pervert?" Jiraiya laughed at that and then spoke towards the big toad. "Actually, I didn't summon you, Gamabunta, the young man over there did." Gamabunta looked at Naruto and seemed to sniff him a bit, and then he removed his pipe and gave out a long smoke. As soon as he was done, the toad summon spoke. "A dragon ascendant, and such a young one too. I never thought the day would come I'd meet one again, much less have one as my newly contracted summoner. Tell me, what's your name?" Naruto could tell that this toad summon was very powerful just by being near him. His dragon ascendant senses were pulsing from the power coming from the massive toad. Apart from that, Fenrix had taught him to respect those with power, especially those of a nature that was not that of the human form, and this road before him was one of them, and he gave his name. "Naruto Uzumaki, and who are you?" "I am Gamabunta, chief of all toad summons. Normally I would expect a great deal of respect from a summoner, but as a dragon ascendant I will let that slide for now. You however had better call me Chief Toad the next time we meet." As soon as that was out of the way, Gamabunta turned his attention to Jiraiya and then spoke to the Sannin. "Now then, Jiraiya, your young friend here succeeded in summoning me, but there seems to be no fighting involved, so either I go back home or we have a sake drinking session." "I should have known you'd say that, Gamabunta. By the way, did a nice job on your summoning Naruto, though summoning Gamabunta on your first try was a bit much." Naruto gave a slight laugh, as well as scratching the back of his head, and Fenrix was then examined by Gamabunta as the senior ascendant looked at the chief toad. The giant toad then spoke to the older ascendant. "Yet another ascendant. I never thought your race would ever return to this world. I was still a tadpole when your race decided to leave this land after the other ascendants started rebelling. What brings your kind back here, I wonder?" Fenrix then replied. "That will be a very long story, Gamabunta." The toad summon nodded and then spoke to Naruto. "Now then, if you want to be able to command me, you will have to share a drink of good sake with me, as well as Jiraiya, and considering that you are a dragon ascendant, I think you will be able to stomach the sake." Naruto had hoped to resist the idea, but Fenrix told him that it was all right, and he joined the group in a sake drinking session. It was not long before Naruto got to taste sake for the very first time in his life. While he was still young by human standards, the fact that he now had the constitution of a dragon meant that he was a lot more resistant to the effects of drinking sake or any alcoholic beverage for that matter. And he had to admit that he was developing a liking to sake. Gamabunta was happy to see his newest summoner was getting deep into the spirit of things and had quite a resistance, and he poured even more. Jiraiya had to admit that he was worried about Naruto the very second the young blonde ninja would drink the sake. The young blonde was quick to develop a liking for sale despite the fact that he was technically underage for drinking liquor. The blonde had to admit that there was a part of him that wondered just what sake tasted, and while it did burn his mouth somewhat. The drinking session lasted well into the night, and, as soon as he was tucked away, Gamabunta had considered the young man a newbie in the art of drinking, but pretty good to have downed a number of bottles with him, Fenrix, and Jiraiya. End of flashback. The next day he woke up with only a slight buzz, that being the only result of his drinking at least 3 sake bottles in one session. Now that might not have sounded like much at face value, but in reality, the sake bottles that Gamabunta brought with him were about the size of small storage sheds. He placed that aside and summoned his chakra, as well as his dragon ascendant powers, and shouted out the command. Kuchiyus no Jutsu. The area was once more surrounded by a massive blast of smoke, and there before the massive sand raccoon under the command of Gaara was Gamabunta with Naruto right on top of his head, and he was using his chakra to hold himself steady on the toad summon head at this moment. Naruto was relieved he was able to pull off the sum. Temari gasped as she looked at the sight before her. She was instructed in all the needed information about Konoha, as well as its known allies, and therefore she recognized just what or rather who the blonde ninja had summoned. I don't believe that blonde could do such a high-level summon. He's supposed to be a genin. Temari was among the very few genin in the history of Suna to be able to summon an animal summon for combat, yet this young man from Konoha could summon such a high-level summon which would have demanded a great level of chakra. This Naruto was proving to be one very deadly threat in combat. Incredible. Sakura spoke out as she saw Naruto summon Gamabunta. She had no idea just where Naruto learned that jutsu, but it was certainly one for the record books. Back in the confrontation, Gamabunta looked at the sight before him and spoke to the blonde ninja and dragon ascendant. So what sort of mess is it this time, Naruto? Looks like you're fighting the Shukaku and the Jinchuriki from the looks of it. Naruto was rather surprised at that. He was not expecting the giant leader of the toad summons to know just who it was that he was fighting. You know Shukaku? The massive toad nodded and replied. I have been in this world for a very long time, Naruto, and I have seen the Bijuu in all their power. However, this one who controls and houses the Shukaku appears to not have allowed himself to fall asleep yet. We should defeat him now before he decides to use some sort of jutsu to place himself into sleep. When he does, then we're going to be in for it. Right. Let's get him, Boss Toad. Gamabunta then took out his dagger, and the two attacked. Gamabunta sliced off the arm of the massive sand construct that replicated the sand raccoon demon, and the fight was well underway with Naruto unleashing attacks of his own to supplement the attacks used by Gamabunta in fighting Gaara and the massive sand form that he was currently using in combat. Gaara managed to use the sand to block most of Naruto attacks until the blonde shouted out his Kage Bushin, and then he was joined by 4 more Kage Bushin, and then the sand ninja was now facing gusts of wind, walls of earth, waves of water, bursts of fire, and bolts of lightning from the blonde genin who was still proving to be quite a pest, and Gamabunta added to that by unleashing a number of deadly water attacks showing that he was able to use water-based jutsu, befitting his nature as an animal summon who was attuned to water. Water bullet. The massive blasts of water slammed hard as Gaara managed to shield himself, as well as resisting the attack of lightning from one of the Kage Bushin that was there with Naruto. He growled and then decided to finally end this fight once and for all. As Gamabunta used his short sword to tear off yet another part of the body of the sand form of his tailed beast, the young sand genin decided to use that jutsu, the one he had never resorted to for a long time, but now had no choice but to use to finally kill Naruto. I will kill you. Gamabunta quickly recognized the technique about to be used by Gaara and spoke. That is not good. That boy is going to let himself be put to sleep using a jutsu. What good will that do him anyway? That boy, as you might have found out, is the container of the Shukaku. I know for a fact that demon beast is a violent being that loves nothing more than overwhelm the mind of its current host, and I can bet that young man's been trying to stay awake to keep that blasted monster from consuming his entire mind. The Shukaku's a bloodthirsty creature and no doubt demands sacrifices in blood to satisfy itself, and that kid does it to placate the thing. Kami is what made Gaara become a monster. That is possible, but we have no time. The second that jutsu works, we won't be fighting that kid anymore, we'll be fighting Shukaku. And sure enough, it was not long before Gaara succeeded in putting himself to sleep, and then the Shukaku came out, and Naruto could tell that Gamabunta was right. The Shukaku was indeed crazy, as well as bloodthirsty, as it talked like it was drunk and wanted to kill them both. They were forced on the defensive at this point as the Shukaku began to unleash massive blasts of pure chakra-enhanced air. Gamabunta then told Naruto that the only way to repress the Shukaku was to wake Gaara up with a strike. However, that was not going to be simple, as Gamabunta had to do his best to avoid the powerful attacks of the Shukaku lest they take a fatal hit. Naruto decided to do his absolute best to slow down Gaara and the Shukaku after Gamabunta told him that the only way to stop the Shukaku's rampage was to strike at Gaara to wake him up and ensure that the spell would be broken, banishing the Shukaku back into the recesses of Gaara's mind. He understood that the best chance they had was to restrain the Shukaku long enough for a strike to be used on Gaara. However, he knew that the boss toad would not be able to hold on for long due to not having the limbs to grab onto the Shukaku since he was a toad, so he decided to try a different approach. "I got an idea, boss toad." "Then go for it, kid. I doubt we'll be able to keep up this dodging game for long." Naruto quickly had his Kage Bushin, who was a user of the fire element, to aim for the Shukaku's legs and free arm when he could, while the two other Kage Bushin who could use both earth and wind to try and create sand. The plan seemed odd, but Naruto knew that if he got this right, he could have a chance to allow Gamabunta to get him closer. The fire-wielding Kage Bushin went to work on aiming at the legs of the Shukaku, making the massive creature even angrier while the other two Kage Bushin continued to attack with earth and wind to create sand. The attack was working despite the fact that he could sense his powers beginning to fade as he was using a considerable portion of his powers for this move. The attack continued and Shukaku was getting annoyed. "Hold still so I can kill you," Gamabunta retorted as he leaped away. "Not going to happen." Naruto knew that he had to hurry, but doing this was not as easy as one might think. He focused on defending himself and Gamabunta at the same time while attacking the massive sand form of Shukaku, and the situation was not looking very promising as the battle continued to grow in intensity. However, the young ninja and dragon ascendant was not going to give up as he and his Kage Bushin continued to do the best they could in order to stop Shukaku. It took a lot of energy to make the amounts of sand that he needed, as well as attacking the Shukaku while holding on to Gamabunta, but now he had a chance, and then he summoned yet another brand of Kage Bushin, and they all were of the fire element, and they all directed their attack at Shukaku's limbs just as the two other Kage Bushin using earth and wind respectively guided the created sand at the limbs of the Shukaku. Blazing wave. All six Kage Bushin unleashed massive tongues of fire, as well as fire from their mouths, and the fire hit the sand that the two other Kage Bushin sent at the Shukaku. The sand raccoon demon laughed and was about to close the gap to blast Gamabunta. And Naruto point blank with its chakra-enhanced wind bullet, but then to its shock, its limbs were encased in solid diamond crystals. "What the? Go for it, boss toad." Gamabunta quickly moved in and grabbed the Shukaku as the creature couldn't move, as the massive crystals made from diamond had encased the legs and free arm for a good amount of time. Gamabunta realized that the previous attacks with flame were not meant to harm the Shukaku, but to change the composition of the sand, as well as get it ready to be transformed into diamond crystal. The toad summon was finally able to grab the Shukaku, and Naruto quickly gathered himself to the attack. His body was exhausted from all he had done, but he was far from out of the fight, and, as he closed in and readied his fist, he aimed to wake Gaara with one blow. "Hey you! Wake up!" Whap! The blow was hard enough to send Gaara moving to the side, not enough to kill him, as Naruto's strength was lower than before due to the previous battles and his lower energy reserves. The blow, however, was more than enough to wake Gaara from the sleeping jutsu, and the Shukaku roared, as well as swore, as it was banished back into the recesses of Gaara's mind. "Damn it. I just got out. I'll get you for this." With that, Gaara was now aware and felt the massive pain in his body as he glared at Naruto, who glared right back at him, and before Naruto could attack to finish him off, the brother of Kankuro and Temari unleashed several more tendrils of sand to restrain Naruto and crush him, but Gamabunta was able to shield the boy with his tongue despite the fact that the tendrils of sand were sharpened like diamond blades and drew blood from the tongue of the massive toad summon. But Gaara was far from defeated as he gathered his chakra and controlled the sand all over the area where he and Naruto were once more and began to fight back. Inside the area sealed off by Gamabunta's tongue, Naruto felt the sand wrapping around him, and he knew that even if the tongue of the boss toad shielded him, he still had to get out, and he decided to do what he could with the energy he had left and changed to his water element and then unleashed a massive blast of icy mist and the sand froze around him as Gamabunta finally couldn't hang on anymore and released his tongue. Gamabunta watched as Naruto fought free and finally hit Gaara with yet another blow that finally sent the sand falling apart and breaking as well. The Toad Summon watched as the sand raccoon construct fell to pieces and smiled mentally to himself as he spoke. That boy has got power and guts, this will be worth seeing to the end, but not for me, my chakra is out, not bad kid, you might become as good as the fourth, or even better, if we meet again, I think we need to share some drinks. With that Gamabunta faded away in a puff of smoke as both Gaara and Naruto looked at one another after landing two opposing tree tope. In Konoha. No. That was the only scream that was heard in the massive barrier that kept Hiruzen, Sarutobi, and Orochimaru locked in combat with one another, and the scream was that of Orochimaru, as he had just witnessed something that made him afraid, as well as horrified. Hiruzen had allowed the god of death to consume the arms of Orochimaru's soul and deny him the use of his jutsu arsenal. He coughed as he felt the god of death take his soul as well, and he used his last moments of life to speak. A fitting punishment for one so obsessed with power. Farewell, my foolish student, I am sad I will never get to finish you the way I wanted. You old fool. Give me back my arms. As he fell to the ground, Sarutobi saw the faces of his former teachers, the first and the second Hokage, their words echoing in his mind. He then thought of all the people he had met and known, the young people of the village and those who he called family, and then he thought of Naruto, as well as his meeting with Valen and Fenrix. He smiled at that and then looked to see the face of Orochimaru, but it was not the face of the madman before him, but the face of the quiet, kind, honest, skilled, and gentle young man he once was so long ago, and in that moment, he died. Monkey King Enma spoke his final words and removed the sword from Hiruzen's back, and he himself faded away in a puff of smoke. Orochimaru was angered at the fate he had killed his sensei, but his plan to destroy Konoha and claim Sasuke had failed for this day, and the loss of his arms was something that he knew would haunt him until the time was right. He moved away as the burning pain filled him, as his arms were now dead to the world. He could move them, but he could never use any jutsu until the time came. Orochimaru-sama. Orochimaru turned to his elite group of ninja from sound and spoke seriously. This mission is over, deactivate the barrier. With that done, the barrier that had sealed him and Hiruzen in the battlefield was removed, and the group of loyal Sound Genin took him away. The Konoha Anbu tried to follow, but were unable to, as they were restrained by one of the Sound Genin who manufactured some form of web to catch them. At the bottom, Kakashi, Guy, and Genma were facing Baki and the now revealed Kabuto, and, as the two were about to leave, Kabuto then spoke seriously to Kakashi. It seems you have quite the handful of ninja, one has the Sharingan, and the others possesses a Kekkai Genkai that is unheard of. Make sure that you train both of them well, Kakashi. Sooner or later, Sasuke-kun will be on the side Orochimaru-sama, and I will find out what makes Naruto-kun that powerful, mark my words on that. As Kabuto and Baki left the scene, Kakashi halted both Guy and Genma, and they all gathered the remaining Jonin including Asuma and Yuhi Kurenai, as well as Mitarashi Anko herself, and they quickly made their way to the roof, but not before freeing the Anbu to be on the safe side of things. They could only hope that their Hokage was still alive and safe. Back in the valley, Naruto and Gaara lay on the ground for what seemed like an eternity, both exhausted beyond normal human limits, and it seemed that time had stood still for merely a moment. Gaara had never felt this way. He had been pushed further and greater than he had ever been in his whole life by this blonde ninja from Konoha. He had pushed him to summon even Shukaku, and still he couldn't beat this blonde ninja named Naruto Uzumaki. What the hell is he? The Sand Shinobi turned, and to his horror, the once unconscious Naruto began to rise and move towards him, his eyes filled with killing intent. Gaara looked on and shouted out in desperation as he felt fear and terror. It was so thick and so strong in him, he felt like he was going to choke on it all. No. Stay away from me. Naruto got up and moved closer and then summoned a blade of wind into his hand, but since in terms of ascendance, his powers were still very young, so the sword vanished and he fell to his knees. He tried to get up and focus on stopping Gaara from getting up. Gaara tried to move, but his body was badly drained of chakra. Naruto was pushed to his limit, and by most records, he would not have been able to get up after what he had done to face Gaara. Naruto, however, managed to move his body once more and get to his knees and began to stand up, falling once more to the ground, showing just. But to his shock, Naruto was not showing a look of eagerness in killing him, but sadness and regret. What the? It's painful to be alone, isn't it? Naruto felt his body reach his limits. His powers were not that strong, not like Fenric's, and, as such, he had to dig deep into himself and summon the power of the Kyuubi for the first time in his life now, as a dragon ascendant, but he was not the kind to just give up, as he struggled to get himself to Gaara to stop him. However, he decided to speak to Gaara at this moment. I know how that feels, just like you do. What? Naruto managed to get enough strength to reach a nearby tree and sit down just for a second, and he spoke. You and I are the same. How can you say that? You and I are not alike. Remember when we were in the hospital and I said I had a demon in me as well? I wasn't lying about that. What? I am like you, Gaara. I too contain a demon, and the Kyuubi is inside me. Gaara wanted to deny it, but something deep in his mind told him that there was no lie in the way Naruto spoke, and, as he looked at the blonde who stared back at him, he could tell that the blonde ninja meant each word. He then saw Naruto reveal the mark, and while the seal was not the same as his was, he could see that it was a very complex and powerful seal, something used only to contain something of immense power. That was the proof Gaara needed to see to know that Naruto was correct in stating that they were the same. But there is a difference between you and me. I have friends, people I care about in this world. I won't hurt anyone, including you. If I have to kill you to stop you, Gaara, I will. Naruto then moved forward despite the injuries he had since the fighting. Gaara managed to finally find some level of strength to move, but only to reach a nearby rock and sit up on it, and he spoke then to Naruto, amazed that even after the pounding they both went through, and the fact that he was out of strength, the blonde ninja who was like him still had what it took to move. Why do you fight for them so much? Why don't you fight for yourself? Because they saved me from becoming lost in hatred, pain, suffering, torment, and anger. They saved me from my own hell. They gave me purpose, they gave me a place to call home, and they are friends, and I will fight for them to my last breath. Naruto tried to get closer, but it was then that Fenrix, as well as Sasuke and Sakura arrived on the scene. Sasuke spoke to Naruto. Hey, that's enough, this fight's over, you've won. He's got no strength left to fight back. Sakura also nodded and spoke. You don't have to do this anymore, Naruto, this fight is over. Naruto smiled at that and fell to the ground. The two members of his team became worried, but Fenrix shook his head with a smile. He's fine, he needs to just rest. The others faced Gaara just as Temari and Kankuro showed up. The two siblings looked at their brother, shocked at how badly beaten and exhausted he looked at the moment. They then faced the group while Sakura and Sasuke got ready for a possible attack while Fenrix replied as he revealed his own tattoos, and the colors swirled, showing that while he had no doubt he could beat them easily, he was not going to waste his energy on them. This fight was over, so there was no need for him to fight. You will gain nothing staying here, this fight is over, your side lost. He's right, this is enough, the plan failed. Temari and Kankuro turned to their brother, and Kankuro decided to help their brother out of the area, and so did Temari. After seeing how Naruto fought with their brother and knowing now that Fenrix was far greater in terms of power and ability than Naruto, they would stand no chance before him. With that in mind, the three left the scene, allowing Fenrix to carry Naruto on his back while Sasuke and Sakura rallied with both Shikamaru and Shino, as well as Shino's father, and Asuma, while the senior dragon ascendant unleashed his wings to fly back to Konoha. There in the village of Konoha, the bad news of the death of the third Hokage was already moving about, dampening the victory earned by the forces of Konoha at the loss of their leader. However, they saw on his face a smile showing that while he died, he was happy to have given his all in the defense of the village. Days later, Konoha was very busy in the rebuilding itself after the invasion of both Suna and Odo, and it was taking a while, gathering the dead and preparing them for burial, rebuilding homes, salvaging materials from ruined houses for reuse, and also sending out request orders for skilled workers to help with rebuilding the village itself. Thankfully, none of the VIPs were harmed, and many were able to go back home as well. It was also something of a very solemn occasion, as their Hokage, the third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi, was buried in full honors for his deeds and his sacrifice in ensuring that Konoha would not fall. Many other ninja who died were also given honorary burial, And while there were those who sought to avenge themselves by attacking Sound and Sand for this attack, the council forbade military action, as they were not an authority to authorize the attack, and doing so would not be a wise move. So far the village had much to work on in order to be back at full form. However, the fact that manpower was currently in short supply due to their losses, the Konoha Council had no choice but to get every available ninja they could get their hands on. Even genin were now taking on assignments that were normally reserved for Chuunin, as many were slain. However, they were thankful that their casualties were not very high, thanks to a certain pair of warriors who were with them. When the ninjas saw Naruto and Fenrix summon the giant tree men, they were shocked. It had already filled the village that Naruto wielded a powerful Kekkai Genkai and had proven to be very more than able to defeat the Byakugan, one of the noble Kekkai Genkai, and that was a great feat, and summoning those living tree men was something else entirely. Many of the people had seen the tree men crush and stomp down on the Sand and Sound forces, and even veteran ninja had to admit that the sight was ghastly as the Ents did their work and the forces of the invaders were crushed to literal pulp. To see the trees surrounding their village come to life, to fight for Naruto was something they thought they would never be able to see in their lifetimes. That had been a great source of questions on what other powers Naruto had as a result of his Kekkai Genkai, and there was the fact that he was head of a new clan. That had been the talk of the village recently, and it had been a source of great speculation as well. While there were still those who distrusted or were hostile to Naruto, they now realized that attacking the youth was out of the question. If he could do all that in combat, then any attack they would make would be tantamount to committing suicide. Others such as Konohamaru, however, were very happy for his boss, and he was eager to see if Naruto could teach him how to do those amazing abilities he had seen before. The grandson of the third Hokage was very eager to see how powerful he would become and how he could learn and grow to get a chance to face his friend and rival for the office of Hokage someday. There was also talk of the fact that Naruto was head of the clan and he would need to find others to add to his clan to make it grow and prosper. There were some very serious discussions that were considered somewhat inappropriate by others, but there was no stopping it at this moment while construction was going on. The village was going to be under the rule of the Konoha Ninja Council in the absence, or rather, the death of Hiruzen Sarutobi, and at the moment, they had just recently gotten word that the people of Sand had discovered that their Kazekage was found slain. And they had discovered that the killer had been Orochimaru, and he had masqueraded as their Kazekage from the start of the whole affair and had deceived them all. This was why they were giving an unconditional surrender, and while there were some of the villagers who wanted them to pay dearly for breaking the alliance, the elders forbade it, as they knew that doing so in their current state would be bad news indeed. Now the council had to deal with reconstruction and hiring both workers from within the Land of Fire and outside of it in order to fix the damage done to it by the invaders, and it was going to be a while before things were back to normal. In Naruto's new home, Naruto was busy sparring with his sensei in the art of being a dragon ascendant. As they were in the training hall of his home fortress, the two had spent as much time as they could in improving his abilities for combat, as well as traveling with Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura when they were sent out on patrol missions. So far there was no mission available that was higher than B rank for the moment, so he spent as much time as he could with his team so as not to get lost in what was happening at the moment. The blonde ninja had to admit that using the powers he had was a rush, and he had asked Sasuke what it felt like to get his Sharingan for the first time. It was somewhat a surprising question for the last Uchiha survivor, but he answered that it was not painless, but it helped a great deal. That was enough for him, as he and the others continued with their missions. It was then that Kakashi brought up the question on how he was feeling about being head of his own clan. Naruto couldn't help but blush at that and told them what exactly Fenrix told them, and that got a smile out of Kakashi, as well as a deep blush from Sakura and even a slight smirk from Sasuke. The Jonin then told Naruto that it was how things started after all for most clans. They needed to be able to grow, which was why there was the law of polygamy, so they could grow at the right numbers, and then Kakashi asked him does he have any plans to take a wife. The second the Jonin asked him that question, the blonde shook his head and blushed wildly at the idea of him getting married at so young an age, and he made that very plain, much to the utter amusement of his team. Even Sasuke couldn't help but find it rather humorous the way Naruto was going at it and blushing as hard as he was at this moment. As he thought back on his time with the team, he looked at his Dragon Ascendant sensei. Fenrix sensei, can I ask you something? Of course. What is it you wish to ask me about Naruto? Naruto knew that this was a very personal question, but he wanted to know something more about his sensei and the ways of the Ascendants. Have you ever fallen in love? Fenrix gave a slightly amused expression at that and replied. My, that is quite the question, Naruto. Why are you interested in my love life? Well, if you don't want to, sensei, I guess. No, it's all right. I've been in love before, Naruto. I still remember her so long ago, and that was quite a while. Do you want me to tell you who she was? Naruto nodded, and Fenrix thought back about the past. It was so long ago now, but he remembered it, as clear as day. I met my beloved when we were just children actually. I wasn't even an ascendant then. I was just a regular young man, full of dreams, hopes, plans, and always having a loud mouth, causing trouble kind of like you in a way. In that regard, you could say you remind me of myself so long ago. I was just a simple son of a militia man, and she was the daughter of a noble. I was there training one day when she walked towards me and asked me if I wouldn't mind playing with her. Tamara never got along with other children of nobles, always squabbling and causing all sorts of trouble for their own benefit. I was rather surprised then and thought she was going to get me in trouble. What happened? We became good friends for years. As she grew up, she was more a noble lady to everyone, but with me, she loved to ride on horseback, move through the forests, and live a happy life. I still recall seeing her playing near a river on one of our outings, and she would move her hair in the wind and smile happily. She was a beautiful Naruto. What happened then? Fenrix sighed and replied. She was the daughter of a noble family after all, and she was destined to be married off to another. I was devastated to hear of it, and so was she, but she had to do it. However, before she left, she told me she would always love me, no matter what happened. Weeks after she left, I trained my best to be a strong fighter, and I did so, and rose to be one of the best soldiers in the army then. It was after many years that I was told by Tamara's father that he wanted me to go see her in her husband's home. I did, and she was still radiantly beautiful, but she was sad and seemingly lost her usual spark for love as well. Her husband pretended to be a great and caring man, but I learned differently. He was neglectful, wasteful of his inheritance, and he hurt her badly and treated her more like an object than a woman. I felt my blood boil many times over at that, and it took so much of my inner will to not cut him down there, and then I gathered all the evidence I could and then returned to her father. And she was able to leave him. The man was imprisoned after that, and I was allowed to be with Tamara. She had suffered a lot, but she endured, and we were married. She was afraid I would never want her for what happened to her. But I loved her, and no amount of time could change that, and I wanted her more. Those were the best years of our life, and I cherished them. But the pain and suffering finally took their toll on her, and she passed away. I lost her, as well as our firstborn child. I was inconsolable, and I wanted to die so badly, I nearly fell on my own sword. Naruto was silent, and he couldn't help but feel great sympathy for his mentor. It was then that I met Valen, and he allowed me to see her again in the spirit world. I told her that I was so sorry that I had never been able to tell her how I felt, how I loved her, and how foolish I was to have not said it out loud, and she told me that it was all right. She always knew that I loved her, and she would always love me no matter what, and she would watch over me as well, alongside our child in the afterlife. That brought me much peace, more than I ever could imagine, and when I knew that Master Valen was a Dragon King, I became his student and became a Dragon Ascendant. Wow, what happened after that? I spent time seeing other lands, seeing civilizations rise and fall, and more besides, but I learned one thing as I watched others who were in love, and I will teach you what I have learned about love since you asked me about love, Naruto, so listen closely to what I have to say. Yes, sensei. Love is a beautiful thing in Naruto. It can make you feel emotions you have never ever felt before, and it can be something that you can never really forget. Thus, no matter how many times you feel it, treasure love because it will be something that can keep you strong in the dark times ahead. Anyway, I think that it's best that we continue with your training, alright? Naruto nodded as the two of them continued with their training, as they traded punches and strikes at one another, as they moved back and forth in the battle ahead of them, as they unleashed tongues of either flame, water, earth, air, and lighting at one another in their elemental taijutsu training. Naruto's body was healing rapidly, and no doubt in Fenrix's mind Naruto would be more than ready for any possible danger. Hours later, Fenrix stopped the training and decided to teach Naruto a powerful spell that could be very useful to his student. Naruto, I am about to teach you a very special power that may very well tip the scales in your favor in a fight. What is that, Fenrix-sensei? This is called the Elemental Life Force Technique. Elemental Life Force Technique? Fenrix nodded and decided to show Naruto some information that could help him understand the lesson better. There are 5 key elemental forces in the world, as you already know: air, fire, water, earth, and lightning. Each has unique properties that separate one from the others. However, they are still energy, and through the use of all 5 elemental energies, one can heal any injury, no matter how grievous. It can also restore youth and vitality if used in the right manner, or even bring a person back to life. The mention of bringing a dead person back to life was more than enough to get Naruto's attention. What? How? Fenrix knew that would get Naruto's attention right off the bat, and he explained carefully to the young man. You can divide the human form into the 5 elements in a shorter term. The body, bones, organs, and flesh can be considered as the human form of earth. The blood and life fluids can be tied to the human form of water, the energy that provides the spark of life or the energy of life, and movement can be seen as the human version of lightning. The breath needed to sustain the body can be tied to air, and lastly the spirit and soul of humans can be attributed to the power of fire. The Elemental Life Force Technique is transforming all 5 elemental energies, or in this case, chakra, and creating a pure form of life energy. It can bring a person back to life. Can I use it to bring the old man back? Fenrix had a feeling Naruto would ask that question, and replied. In truth, yes. However, the technique used by Sarutobi was summoning and sacrificing his soul to the god of death, and even dragon ascendants cannot challenge the god of death in his own realm. Because Sarutobi used his soul as the bargaining chip, there is nothing this technique can do to bring him back to life due to the pact made to the god of death. Naruto was not very happy with the news, and Fenrix could see that fact on his student's face, and he spoke. However, if the person has not made a pact with the god of death, then they can be brought back to life, as their spirits will linger in the boundary world between that of the living and that of the dead, and until they are allowed into the realm of the dead, they are not gone. And by using this technique, they can indeed be brought back to life. I will show you what I mean in a moment. Fenrix then stood up and began to use a spell, and there before Naruto appeared a table with a sheath, and then Fenrix removed the sheath to reveal a certain female ninja who died. Wait a minute. I recognize her as one of the Sound Genin. What is she doing here? She was used as a sacrifice by Orochimaru for a powerful jutsu to bring one of the former Hokage back to life to fight Sarutobi. Orochimaru used her like a pawn, and this was the result. By all rights she should be dead, but I doubt that, while she had physically died, her spirit still lingers and has not passed the judgment on whether she is to be sent in the dark pits or to the divine planes. She currently is a ghost, so to speak, though she has not gathered the needed power to manifest here in the realm of the living. Naruto was still surprised to be seeing the dead body of Kin, the Sound Kunoichi who he had met long ago in the classroom, where the first half of the Chuunin Exams had taken place. She seemed to have been cleaned up and appeared to be very much normal, except for the gray skin tone. He then turned to Fenrix and wondered what he was going to do. He didn't have to wait long as Fenrix allowed his tattoos to appear, and they all glowed, and then before the younger dragon ascendant's eyes the senior ascendant began to summon 5 spheres of energy. One was deep red like a ruby, and then it burst into fire. The next globe was as blue as water and seemed to had droplets of water flowing all around it. Another sphere was as brown as the earth, mixed with a healthy green, and there were clumps of soil flowing around the sphere. Another was deep yellow and had arcs of energy erasing on the surface. Fenrix then focused his powers, and then the 5 sphere began to turn into a deep white glow and became glowing spheres of energy, and then they all merged into one glowing mass that nearly blinded Naruto. There was so much energy in that sphere that he was amazed his sensei could even control it all. Fenrix then moved the sphere to Kin's body and then pushed into the lifeless corpse of the Sound Kunoichi. Naruto watched in amazement as the once gray skin of the corpse began to take a healthy pink shade, and it seemed that life came back to all of her body, and to his still present amazement, the formerly dead female ninja from Sound opened her eyes. As Fenrix completely imbued the sphere into her body, he stepped back, and it was not long before Kin began to speak. What, where? Kin tried to get up, and she felt a rising panic, as instead of being below a sky, she was looking at a roof of stone, and she felt as if something had just rushed into her. She tried to move her hands and felt them move. To her astonishment, she slowly got up to sit and look about, Seeing the walls of the fortress mansion under Naruto's ownership and then spotted both Naruto and Fenrix, she began to panic a bit and tried to reach for her weapons, but Fenrix spoke to her at that instant. "It would be best that you calm yourself, Kintsuchi, you have just been resurrected from the land of the dead." "What?" The sound Kunoichi was naturally confused by this, as Fenrix expected, as Naruto looked on in awe as he hoped to learn just how his sensei did that. Fenrix managed to learn the details from the Anbu captain on how Kin had been sacrificed when they found her body, and he was angered that there was someone like Orochimaru willing to do such things in this world. The rogue ascendants who used their powers for darker purposes were worse, of course, but this was still very much something that aroused his ire. "You were betrayed by your master Orochimaru and used as a sacrifice to bring to life one of the former Hokage of Konoha who had died. In effect, you were used as a pawn by Orochimaru and left to die. Do you remember anything now?" The memories came flooding back into her mind at that exact moment as she recalled the time she and Zaku had been brought into the chamber with the bodies of the Hokages being there, and then they were hit by the jutsu that Orochimaru had prepared to use, and then all they recalled was blinding pain that burned through them, and then everlasting darkness. As she thought back on the feelings of being dead, Kin shuddered and felt as if she was going to throw up. She had hoped to be of some help to her master in conquering Konoha and also be able to return home and boast about her accomplishments. Instead, she was killed by her own master and left to rot. That is not the only time, however. Your master had also used a cursed seal on Sasuke before you, and your team had come to face him in combat. He wanted to see Sasuke in action with that seal, and you were going to die fighting him. You were knocked unconscious and therefore was not aware of this, but that is the truth. Kin sat down and began to digest all she had been told, and then she looked at both Naruto and Fenrix and spoke. "What are you going to do to me now?" Fenrix then spoke. "You have been given a new life in Tsuchi of Sound Village, and for once, you are free to decide your fate, and your decisions are your own. You may decide to return to Sound, if that is your desire. If not, then you are free to leave this place, and I will guide you out of Konoha under my protection." Kin looked at her hands and thought back on what had happened to her after she had been duped by her former master Orochimaru. She thought that her life meant something, but she had been used by Orochimaru and killed without any form of mercy. Even though the life she had in Sound was hard, she had hoped to be able to live long enough to see many things. Orochimaru took that away from her without any hesitation, as she was nothing but a pawn to him. But now she had been given back her life by this man, and she was given freedom to decide for herself what her fate would be in the future, something that she had never thought about or taken seriously until now. She felt her heartbeat, her lungs take in air, and her mind think, and more. She smelled the air, listened to all sounds, and even looked intently at everything. She thought long over this, and, as soon as she was finished with her thoughts, she then decided to give her decision on what she was going to do from here on out. She was not going back to Sound anytime soon. She was already considered dead by everyone there to begin with. There was nothing and no one waiting back there for her, and she was not in the mood to see Orochimaru again, or anyone in Sound for that matter. "I want to stay. Here in Konoha? Not in Konoha, here in this place." Fenrix thought it over and then saw that Kin was serious in her desire to remain here in this fortress mansion, and then he spoke. "Then you have made your own decision. You should know that this place is the home of the new clan of Konoha known as the Uzumaki clan, and therefore you can choose to be adopted or to be married into it and be accepted and be under its protection." Kin then blushed at that idea, and then she asked something important, at least to her mind, and thought. "I prefer to be adopted for now. Marriage isn't on my mind at the moment." Fenrix nodded and turned to Naruto. "Kin has asked to be adopted into your clan, Naruto. As head of the clan, it is your decision to allow her to be adopted into your clan." Naruto had to admit that this was a very new and serious situation. He knew that now, as head of his own clan, he had the power and authority to accept or reject Kin into his clan, and therefore leave her to the mercies of the village of Konoha. There was no doubt in his mind that as soon as she was discovered, she would be arrested, or worse, by Konoha. Besides, it seemed that Kin sounded sincere about her desire never to go back to Sound, and he decided to give her a chance. "I accept." Fenrix smiled, and Kin felt a feeling of relief at Naruto's decision. As soon as that was done, Fenrix began to teach Naruto several other skills in elemental manipulation while Kin watched. And she watched as Naruto began to learn the elemental life force technique, though he used his own variation of the move. Normally cynics would say that Kin would no doubt escape and return to sound and report to Orochimaru all she had seen, and there was truth in that belief. If Orochimaru found out about Naruto's newfound powers and his potential, then he would seek out Naruto, as well as Sasuke. With the power of a dragon ascendant and the Sharingan, Orochimaru would unstoppable, but Kin was not going to do so. They had given her back her life, and she was not going to betray that trust. In the training, Fenrix then taught Naruto another powerful yet rarely used technique, and that was the body recreation and resurrection technique. This was following the same principles as that of the elemental life force technique, but instead of breathing life back into a recently deceased person, this required the ascendant to use the 5 elements to actually create a living body and then imbuing it with a living soul to make it come to life. Essentially, it was somewhat similar to the impure world resurrection techniques used by Orochimaru, but it was different, as it required no sacrifice in terms of using a living person to form the body of the soul. Now does it need ash and dirt to form the original body of the soul? And required no seal to restore the appearance of the deceased. Instead, it created a purely new body for the soul to inhabit and then mold into the same likeness the soul had in life in its original body. And in effect, the body is not a fake, but an exact living and breathing person complete with all the powers and memories of their past lives. However, in order to be more effective, Naruto had to travel into the spirit realm and petition a being known as the Watcher to allow a soul to be returned to the realm of the living, and then Naruto would need to fuse the soul into the newly created body. The newly resurrected person is also subject to a second death, as they are not immortal, though they will have a slightly longer lifespan than most mortal living beings. Another weakness is that, in order to do both the creation of the body itself from the elements and then entering the realm of the dead, as well as petitioning for the return of the soul, Naruto must have his powers at a certain level of maturity. He could achieve it in his current level, but it would require a greater deal of power, and the only way he could possibly overcome that limit is to remove his restraining bracers while in the realm of the dead. But Fenrix warned him not to attempt it without a good enough reason, for doing so would severely weaken him, and it would take months or even years to fully recover. This technique is only done by much more skilled and experienced ascendants, but even so they would be severely drained. Only dragons or dragon kings could do it without any strain. And the final weakness was the petitioning of the soul's return to the realm of the living from the Watcher. The longer the soul has remained in the spirit realm, either in heaven or in hell depending on their nature, then the more demanding the technique will be to accomplish. Fenrix warned Naruto of this as well, and Naruto vowed to use it only as a last resort or when the situation really called for it. As soon as the training was over, they were having their meal break when they were greeted by Jiraiya, who had used the special stone that Fenrix had made. The fortress was imbued with a special locking mechanism that would keep others out if they didn't have a special stone that acted as a recognition and opening device. He had given one to Jiraiya and planned to make a few more for the rest of the people he would allow to be in the fortress. As Naruto was greeted by Jiraiya, he filled them in on why he was there. Apparently he had been given the task to go and look for Tsunade, one of the 3 Sannin, and ask her to take the place of Hokage here in the village. He had been originally given the position, but he turned it down, saying that he was not really the kind of guy to be in the position of Hokage, plus he admitted that he was not really the kind of guy to be tied down that much. Naruto had a feeling that Jiraiya was more interested in being the perverted old man that he was and wondered why he was telling him this of all things. It was then that Jiraiya had told him that he was supposed to be escorted in the mission by a number of Jonin by the council, but he turned them down and decided to take him along. Needless to say, Naruto was far from interested in the idea, and it was only with the offering to learn another useful jutsu that could give him a much-needed combat edge when his dragon ascendant powers could not be used that finally convinced Naruto to get ready and join along. Jiraiya then said he would wait at the gate for him once he got his gear and supplies ready, and Naruto went to work gathering all that he could, as he was told by Fenrix to meet him in the creation hall before he left with Jiraiya. Fenrix also asked Kin accompany him to the creation hall in order for her to learn how to earn her keep in the new home that she had to live at. It would be far more preferable if Kin was able to learn a trade in order to help with the maintenance of the fortress. And he would teach her how to be a good and productive member of the clan that she was now adopted into. As soon as they were in the creation hall, Kin was awed by what she was seeing and quickly realized that she could learn much from this place while she was here, and Fenrix gave her some warm food to eat to help her build her strength and energy, as she had been brought back to life and therefore needed to sustain her food like a normal person. Fenrix was a master forger, and what would have taken weeks to months or even years, he could do in hours. It was then that Naruto showed up, and he was already packed and ready to move out on the mission with Jiraiya. In the creation hall, Naruto held the weapon in his hands and marveled at this weapon. It was a long handle, and on the ends were two double-edged blades at the length of at least 3 feet each, and was made from specially enchanted and high-quality steel. The two blades were well made and balanced. And following the instructions of his Dragon Ascendant sensei, the blades quickly retracted into the handle, and he looked at the seemingly bladeless weapon and pressed it again, and the blades came back out. Like your present? Yes. Good, this weapon emphasizes the lesson that I will teach you once you return from looking for this Tsunade who shall be the new Hokage. What do you mean? This twin-bladed weapon symbolizes the need for control. When you attempt to use two elements, you must learn to work their natures into a cohesive combination without one overwhelming the other. If there is no control, then the elements will clash and disrupt one another, and your ability as a fighter in combat will naturally suffer as a result. To drive the point home to you, those two blades were specially made to be able to injure you. What? Naruto was shocked to hear that, and Fenrix replied. It will not kill you, of course, but send light pain through your body while not cutting you. When you train with this weapon, you must use it as a staff weapon, and that is where control must be learned, Naruto, as you must be able to defend and strike with enough power and control. If you attack with too much power, then the other blade will injure you, and you lose control. Once you master both control and power, you can attack and defend in equal measure, and then you can learn to use two elements in unison. That is what this weapon will show you. Naruto began to understand the idea, though not entirely at the moment, as he took the weapon, and he asked Fenrix the question that had been plaguing him ever since he got the weapon. Aren't you coming with me, Fenrix-sensei? Fenrix shook his head and explained his reasons. You are a clan head now, and, as your advisor, as well as your teacher and guardian, I have to remain here to defend your land, home, and name. You have matured enough to merit going out on your own and learning on your own for a while, and Jiraiya has asked me to allow him to train you in a special jutsu that you might find useful in the near future. As much as you need to learn the ways of the Ascendants to master your powers, you must also learn the ways of ninjas, as you should before your powers awaken. Your defeat of Gaara when you two fought has proven to me that you can handle yourself for now until your return and require more instruction from me. There is only so much you can learn from these walls of the training hall after all. True knowledge and wisdom are gained as well as given. Besides, all the training and lessons I give you will not be effective if you are not using them in the real world, for it is in the real world where your training, knowledge, and experience can be put to the test. Fenrix then took out a small gemstone necklace and handed it to his student, and, as Naruto looked at the necklace, he spotted that Fenrix wore the very same necklace of his neck. However, I will not be far, this is a recall stone, and if you are in need of my help, or are in true danger, then this recall stone will cast a teleportation spell, and I will be there to aid you in whatever you need done. I have faith in you and your growth as both an Ascendant and Ninja Naruto, and that is why you will do well here. Naruto smiled and bowed to Fenrix. I will not disappoint you or everyone in Konoha. I will bring Tsunade back to be our new Hokage. Fenrix nodded and bowed back to Naruto. As soon as that was over, Naruto walked out of the hall and was met by Jiraiya himself, who was smiling at him, and the two headed off to find Tsunade, who Fenrix was already familiar with due to the fact that he had been informed on just who Tsunade was by chatting with both Jiraiya and Hiruzen. As Naruto gathered his supplies and money, he moved out and left his fortress home and headed off to the gates of Konoha, where Jiraiya was already waiting for him. As the two left, Naruto hoped to head back home soon after learning this new jutsu Jiraiya promised, and also being able to help in rebuilding his home of Konoha, as well as building his clan, though he had no idea just how he was going to find a wife in order to get his clan started out. Little did Naruto realize that, as soon as he got home, things were going to get very interesting for him, as only half a day after he left. In the Hyuga estate, Hiashi had thought over his decision concerning the fact that there was a new clan, led by none other than the one commanded by Naruto Uzumaki. The elder of head of the Hyuga family knew that his decision would change the future of the Hyuga clan, and also someone close to him. The fact that this was by far the best way for his clan to grow, while Naruto's clan was new, it held a great deal of power and ability. It was something that no one could afford to ignore, let alone him. Naruto's clan was only starting out, but the power and ability that Naruto displayed in combat both in the Chuunin Exams and in the battle with the combined forces of Suna and Oto told him that if given time, the clan could rise to great stature. And, as clan head of the Hyuga, there was a lot for him and the clan to gain, both in terms of alliance and in terms of strength. Of course, Hiashi also thought of other things as well that involved his decision concerning his eldest daughter. "You sent it to me, father?" Hiashi turned and saw his daughter Hinata, who was there before him in perfect health. While he acted coldly towards her and had all but kicked her out, there was reason for his actions. He knew Hinata had the talent and skill to be a great ninja and user of the Byakugan despite what others including Neji might believe. The flaw was that Hinata lacked two things: confidence in herself and her abilities and the desire to succeed and improve, things that Hiashi knew were very important for a leader of a clan. That was why he pushed Hinata away, not because she was worthless, but she didn't fight for her true worth and make herself stronger. Yes, she trained herself harder, but without the will to succeed and fight for herself and her comrades and to accomplish the mission to the best of her abilities, it would all be for nothing. Hinata had fought with Neji, who had been easily beaten by Naruto with his Kekkai Genkai, and he knew how much of an influence Naruto had on Hinata. While he didn't interfere with her life, Hiashi did keep tabs on his daughter to see if she had gathered the courage to stand for herself. It was when she was supported by Naruto that she began to grow stronger in her abilities and her confidence, signs that while it was still early, there was a chance that Hinata would be finally able to push herself to be better. And now it was time to surprise her. "Yes, we have some other guests coming, so I would like you to remain here for a while." Hinata nodded, and then in arrived Kurenai, Kiba, Akamaru, and Shino, as well as Neji and Hanabi. As everyone gathered and sat before him, Hiashi thought through his plans and decided to speak. "Hinata, you will need to be ready to leave your team for the time being." "Father?" Hinata was surprised, and so were the others, including Kiba and Akamaru. Kurenai was very curious about all this and wondered just what was Hiashi planning. While he was Hinata's father, she was Hinata's adopted mother after her real mother died, and while she knew that she had no authority here, she did have the right to speak. "Hiashi-sensei, I would like to know the reason as to why Hinata must leave the team." Hiashi looked at Kurenai and replied, "There is a reason for it. Hinata will have to get ready to be married." Hinata gasped. "Married?" "Yes, as heiress to the clan, you have to be ready to be married to a prominent member of society to continue the Hyuga clan, which is why you will need to leave your team for the time being so you can meet your soon-to-be husband and he will be able to meet you as well. This will take effect tomorrow, and when it does, you will need to leave your team." Hinata tried her best not to cry. She had hoped to continue becoming a ninja for her team and impress Naruto and maybe tell him her feelings of love towards him. But now it seemed that she was going to be denied this chance for the rest of her life, being married to another hurt her like a kunai to the leg, but she knew, as heiress of the Hyuga clan, she had to do her duty. Kurenai could tell that Hinata was trying her best not to cry, and, as much as she wanted to comfort Hinata and help her, there was no chance of doing so. She was not of the clan, and this was not her business after all. Hiashi was head of the clan, and he had final say. The same could be said for Kiba, Akamaru, and Shino. The two ninja were not liking this situation a great deal, but they knew they could do nothing at the moment. Hiashi was perceptive of his daughter's state and knew that now was the time to speak when she spoke her turn as well. Hanabi was also very curious about what was going to happen now at this point. And the same could be said for Neji, as he was curious as to why he was involved in this situation at the moment. Hinata gathered her courage and spoke. "Who is it that I am marrying, father? I wish to know who he is at least." Hiashi smiled, and that was enough to surprise everyone in the room, and he replied. "You know him very well, Hinata. In fact, he was then one who inspired you to train harder and even inspired you to fight Neji as well. And I know for a fact that you've had a deep admiration and affection for him when you first met him." It only took a second for the group to get the message on who Hinata was marrying, and the Hyuga heiress began to blush wildly, and it took a moment or two for her to finally find the words that she had thought. "I'm going to marry Naruto-kun?" Hiashi nodded and spoke. "Yes, however, it is entirely up to both Naruto and Fenrix himself, as the senior warrior is Naruto's advisor and retainer, as well as teacher in the use of his Kekkai Genkai and personal bodyguard, and, as I have stated, as Naruto is head of his clan, he decides. I have already sent a request to meet him in order to ask that he and Naruto consider you as his wife in leading the clan that he is now the head of, so do your best to prove that you can be part of his clan, and I have no doubts you will do well. Hinata. Hinata felt like she was going to faint. Of all the things she had expected to happen, this was not one of them, but she dared not faint in front of her father and her sister. It was embarrassing enough already. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. If you want the next part of this story, let me know in the comment box. See you next time, till then sayonara.